New developments tonight in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, more than 4 months after she disappeared from her Tucson home. Volunteers in Mexico say they received a tip about where her remains could be.
This search group regularly looks for missing people, and they've helped find the remains of dozens of people in the Nogales area. But this is the first time they've received a tip that specifically mentioned Nancy Guthrie.
It's always with me, you know. I mean, I cry every morning on the way to work, and I cry every morning on the way home. We still need everybody's prayers.
Yeah,
we still wish someone would call and say what they know.
The Pima County Sheriff's Office says they are aware of the reports about the anonymous tip. They say they have not been contacted by Mexican authorities about the search efforts and that their investigation is ongoing.
January 31st, 2026, Tucson, Arizona. An 84-year-old woman finishes dinner with her family, gets dropped off at her home, and walks through her front door. By the next morning, she is gone, and the only thing left behind is blood on her porch. That woman is Nancy Guthrie. Nancy lived in the Catalina foothills, one of Tucson's most established and upscale residential neighborhoods, nestled against the Santa Catalina Mountains. She was 84 years old, a woman of deep faith, a devoted mother of 3 grown children, a grandmother. And yes, she is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-host of NBC's Today Show. But before any of that became a headline, Nancy was simply a woman living quietly in her Tucson home, attending church, keeping her routines, and spending time with the people she loved. She had limited physical mobility. She needed daily medication to manage her health. She was not a woman who moved through the world independently anymore. Her family was close. Her neighbors knew her. Her life was structured, predictable, and small in the best possible way. And that routine is exactly what made the night of January 31st so significant. That evening, Nancy had dinner at the home of her daughter, Annie. It was an ordinary family evening. Nothing that would stand out. Nothing that would signal what was coming. When dinner ended, Annie's husband drove Nancy back to her Catalina foothills home. He dropped her off just before 10 p.m. She went inside. That was the last time anyone who loves her saw Nancy Guthrie. The following morning, February 1st, 2026, Nancy was expected at a neighbor's house. The plan was simple: watch an online church service together, the kind of quiet Sunday ritual that had become part of her week. She never showed up. Her neighbor waited. Then worry set in. Relatives were contacted. Someone went to check on her. What they found when they arrived at Nancy's home stopped everything. Nancy was not there. The house was wrong in a way that was immediately clear. And on the front porch, drops of blood. If this case is new to you, hit subscribe right now. We cover every development as it breaks, and this case is far from over. A 911 call was placed at approximately 12:08 p.m. 7 minutes later, at 12:15 p.m., Pima County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene. What happened in the next few hours would set the tone for one of the most closely watched missing persons investigations in recent American history. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos did not stay at his desk that day. He came to the scene himself. That alone told investigators and reporters something serious was happening. Sheriffs do not typically respond personally to calls like this. When asked about it publicly, Nanos did not mince words. He said Nancy's age and her physical condition made this situation deeply alarming from the moment he arrived. And then came the detail that removed all doubt about what had happened. Nancy's critical daily medication, the medication she could not safely go without, was still sitting in her home, untouched, right where she had left it. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly what investigators had already concluded on the ground. Nancy Guthrie has extremely limited mobility. She could not have left that house on her own. She did not walk out. She did not wander. Someone took her. Within hours, a major search and rescue operation was launched across the Catalina foothills. Helicopters swept the area from above. Infrared cameras scanned the terrain for heat signatures. Drones covered ground that deputies could not reach on foot. They found nothing. No trace of Nancy, no trail, no vehicle, no witness. Just a neighborhood that looked exactly as it always did, and one home on one street where an elderly woman had simply ceased to exist overnight, leaving behind only a few drops of blood and a bottle of medication she would never get the chance to take. For 10 days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, the public heard almost nothing. No suspect, no vehicle description, no person of interest named, no confirmed leads released. From the outside, the investigation appeared to be hitting walls. Pressure mounted from the media, from the public, and from a family that was watching every hour pass without answers. 10 days is a long time in a missing persons case, and for an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility and no access to her daily medication, every single one of those days carried weight that is difficult to put into words. Then February 10th arrived, and everything changed. On that day, the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department released something that had taken investigators considerable effort to recover. Footage from Nancy's Nest doorbell camera, pulled not from the device itself, but from residual data located in back-end systems. Because the camera had been deliberately disabled. Whoever came to Nancy Guthrie's home that night knew exactly what they were doing. They tampered with the device. They cut the feed. What they did not account for was that the data had already been pushed to a remote server, and investigators found it. The camera went dark at approximately 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. What the footage captured in the moments before that happened is what broke this case open for the public. A figure approaches Nancy Guthrie's front door. The individual is dressed in full concealment. A balaclava covering the face, gloves on both hands, a holstered weapon visible on the body. Over the shoulders, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack. That backpack detail matters. Ozark Trail is a private label brand sold exclusively at Walmart. That is a searchable, traceable purchase point, and investigators flagged it immediately. The figure moves toward the door, then raises one gloved hand directly toward the camera lens, then walks away. Seconds later, the feed goes dead. FBI Director Kash Patel personally posted the footage to social media, a move that signaled just how seriously federal authorities were treating this case. The FBI's Phoenix field office followed with a formal release of still images pulled from the same back-end recovery. 44 seconds of footage in total made available to the public. A forensic analysis of the footage allowed investigators to build a physical description of the suspect for the first time. The individual is described as male, of average build, standing between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall. It is not much, but it is something. And paired with the backpack detail, it gave the public something concrete to work with. The evidence did not stop at the camera footage. On the ground, searchers discovered a black glove approximately 1.5 miles from Nancy's home. The glove bore a visual resemblance to those worn by the figure in the doorbell footage. It was immediately submitted for DNA testing. In the days that followed, multiple additional gloves were recovered across the broader search area, each one collected, logged, and sent to forensic teams for processing. And then came one of the most significant forensic disclosures in the case. DNA collected from Nancy Guthrie's property did not belong to Nancy. It belonged to someone else. A second individual had been at that home. That DNA is now part of the active forensic case. A man was also detained during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona, a community sitting roughly 12 miles from the Mexican border. He was held overnight and questioned. By the following morning, he was released. He spoke to reporters and said plainly that he was innocent. Investigators did not publicly name him as a suspect. By this point, the FBI had received and was actively reviewing more than 13 zero-zone tips from members of the public across the country. Share this video. The right person seeing this could be the tip that changes everything. Retired Phoenix homicide sergeant Troy Hillman, speaking publicly about the doorbell footage, called it a huge break for law enforcement. But he was careful with his words. He said directly, "This does not mean the case is solved. A break in evidence and a solved case are two very different things." And as the investigation was about to show, the complexity of what happened to Nancy Guthrie was only beginning to surface. A face hidden behind a mask, gloves sitting in a forensic lab, a camera that was supposed to be silenced forever and almost was, while investigators were processing physical evidence and forensic data from the scene. A separate and equally urgent thread was developing in parallel, one that did not involve gloves or DNA or doorbell cameras. This thread involved money, specifically $6 million worth of it, demanded in Bitcoin, and delivered not to the Guthrie family first, but to the press. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, ransom notes began surfacing in the hands of national media outlets. TMZ was among the first to receive one. The demand was stark and specific: $6 million in Bitcoin. A deadline was attached. The family was given account information and told what would happen if they paid. That deadline came and went without any publicly confirmed exchange between the family and whoever sent the note. But then TMZ founder Harvey Levin disclosed something that shifted the entire conversation. He revealed that a payment appeared to have been made to the Bitcoin account referenced in the ransom communication. He could not say how much had been paid. The ongoing investigation prevented that disclosure. But the account that received the payment was the same one that had been provided directly to the Guthrie family. That detail alone told investigators this was not a random opportunist throwing out a number. Someone had account-specific information. Someone was watching this case closely enough to know how to position themselves inside it. A second ransom note followed. This one contained a detail that law enforcement did not take lightly. The sender claimed that Nancy Guthrie would be returned to her family within 12 hours of receiving the full $6 million payment. Investigators took that timeline and worked backwards. If the claim were true, if she was being held somewhere reachable within 12 hours, that placed her within an estimated 700-mile radius of Tucson. That radius covers significant ground. It includes multiple U.S. states and reaches deep into Mexico. But not every communication in this case was what it appeared to be. Derek Colella, a 42-year-old man from California, was arrested and charged with sending a hoax ransom message directly to Nancy's oldest daughter, Annie, and her son-in-law. Investigators traced the messages back to a digital phone number connected to Colella's personal email address and IP address in California. When confronted, Colela admitted to making the contact. He had inserted himself into one of the most high-profile missing persons cases in the country with a fabricated ransom demand. His arrest was a reminder that cases of this public magnitude attract people willing to exploit a family's desperation for their own purposes. A separate message was also sent to a local Tucson television station. Investigators reviewed it carefully, but could not confirm whether it was connected to the Bitcoin ransom chain or was another isolated contact attempt. Then in April 2026, a new note arrived, and this one said something none of the previous communications had said. The sender claimed for the first time that Nancy Guthrie was dead. The note also claimed she had been seen in Sonora, Mexico. It went further, directly criticizing the FBI for dismissing earlier messages as scams and insisting the agency had made a critical error in doing so. TMZ confirmed the sender had been in repeated contact with the outlet across several months, each time demanding Bitcoin payment in exchange for information about Nancy's whereabouts. Like this video so more people find this case. Every view matters. Former FBI agent Lena Coffindaffer responded publicly to the Bitcoin demands with a pointed observation. She noted that Bitcoin is highly traceable, a direct signal that investigators may already be following the financial trail wherever it leads. The FBI confirmed it had been in active contact with the Mexican government and Mexican law enforcement throughout this period. The border had become a focal point, and the question hanging over everything remained exactly the same. Are any of these notes real? And if even one of them is, what does that mean for Nancy Guthrie? While the forensic labs processed evidence and investigators traced Bitcoin wallets, the search for Nancy Guthrie crossed an international boundary. South of Tucson, past the desert terrain that stretches from Arizona into Mexico, a group of volunteers had been quietly doing work that governments and agencies often cannot. The organization is called Buscando Corazones, which translates to searching for hearts. Based in the Nogales area of Mexico, this collective has built a reputation across the region for doing the kind of searching that requires patience, training, and a willingness to go into places most people would not. They have located the remains of dozens of missing people across remote parts of northern Mexico. Their work is not glamorous. It is methodical, physically demanding, and emotionally heavy. And they do it because nobody else will. Their leader is Ramona Guadalupe Ayala Ortiz. Ramona has years of experience in what investigators call clandestine grave detection. The trained ability to read disturbed earth, to spot the signs that ground has been altered by human hands rather than nature. Her team receives anonymous tips almost every day. Most lead them into remote terrain. Some lead nowhere. But every tip gets treated the same way, with seriousness and with urgency. Then came a tip that stood apart from the rest. An anonymous caller contacted Ramona and told her that the remains of Nancy Guthrie were buried near the Mariposa port of entry, one of the official border crossings between Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Mexico. Ramona was direct about what she knew going into that call. She was not familiar with the Nancy Guthrie case before the caller mentioned her name. Once she was told, she looked the case up, and then she treated it exactly the way she treats every search, without hesitation and without difference. The caller gave specific directions. Search near the streams. Look beneath a velvet tree. That was all. Buscando Corazones knows what to look for. Burn marks on soil. Ground that sits unevenly. Disrupted root systems. Patches where the earth has been turned and resettled in a way that does not match the surrounding terrain. These are the markers of a clandestine grave, and Ramona's team has learned to find them. The first search was conducted on May 16th alongside Mexican authorities. They worked the area carefully and methodically. They found nothing. A second search was carried out days later at the same location. Again, nothing. A third search was being planned along a nearby stream. Ramona stated plainly that the team had not given up. They had hope they would find something. Back in Tucson, a separate discovery briefly raised alarms when human bones were found near Nancy's home. That alarm was short-lived. A spokesperson confirmed the bones were not criminal in nature. They were connected to a prehistoric anthropological investigation in the area. The Pima County Sheriff's Office confirmed they were aware of the anonymous tip to Buscando Corazones. They also confirmed they had not been contacted directly by Mexican authorities regarding the search efforts. Their own investigation, they said, remained ongoing. And somewhere out there, volunteers pressed their hands into foreign soil, searching for a woman they had never met, following a whispered tip toward a velvet tree by a stream, coming up empty, but not yet stopping. May 2026. 100 days since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in the Catalina foothills. 100 days with no arrest, no confirmed suspect, no public breakthrough, and a family still waiting. The Pima County Sheriff's Department marked the milestone with an official statement that was measured and deliberate in its language. Scientific evidence processing and digital media analysis remain ongoing. That was the update, not an arrest, not a named suspect. A confirmation that the work was still being done and that the answers were not yet there. Sheriff Chris Nanos went a step further in his public communications. He stated that an arrest would be made at some point in this case. He offered no timeline, no details, just a declaration that the investigation was moving toward a conclusion, even if that conclusion was not yet visible to the public. The scale of the federal involvement at this point was significant. The FBI confirmed that 150 agents were actively working the Nancy Guthrie case. That is not a routine deployment. That is a coordinated, resource-heavy federal operation running alongside the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And it reflected how seriously authorities were treating this disappearance. The reward structure that had built up around the case by the 100-day mark was among the largest assembled for a missing persons investigation in recent American history. The FBI was offering up to $100, zero for information leading to Nancy's location or the arrest of anyone involved. A private donor had independently backed an additional $100, zero reward. And the Guthrie family themselves had put forward a $1 million reward for credible information leading directly to Nancy's return. The total pool was substantial, and it remained unclaimed. On the forensic side, a key development had quietly taken place. Critical physical evidence from the investigation had been sent to a specialized forensic laboratory in South Florida for analysis. The nature of that evidence was not publicly disclosed, but the decision to route it to an out-of-state facility indicated investigators were pursuing leads that required capabilities beyond what was locally available. In early April, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show desk. She sat alongside her colleague and close friend Jenna Bush Hugger and spoke openly about how difficult the return had been. She described the show as something to hold on to, 2 hours of her day where she had something to do, somewhere to be, a reason to keep moving. The Today team surrounded her with visible support. But the weight of what she was carrying was not something that could be left at the studio door. Then came Mother's Day 2026. Savannah posted a video tribute to her mother on social media, a compilation of home videos and family photographs, spanning years of shared life. In one clip, Nancy is seen looking directly at the camera and saying the words, "miss you." The caption Savannah wrote read, "Mother, daughter, sister, Noni, we miss you with every breath. Subscribe and hit the bell. When this case breaks, you will want to be the first to know." News Nation confirmed through senior national correspondent Brian Enten that Savannah had not hired private investigators to search for her mother. The family was placing their full trust in law enforcement. Savannah, Annie, and their sibling had released multiple public video appeals, directed not at any single city or region, but at anyone anywhere in the world who might be holding a piece of information they had not yet shared. The case was also drawing the wrong kind of attention. YouTuber Alexander Zabel Jr., 54, was arrested outside Nancy's Tucson home after live streaming from the property following multiple complaints from neighbors. During the arrest, a Pima County Sheriff's Sergeant was knocked to the ground. The incident was a stark illustration of how high-profile missing persons cases can pull in individuals who treat tragedy as content. And then TMZ received yet another communication. A new individual, separate from prior contacts, claimed to know the identity of Nancy's kidnapper. Their price for that information was $100, 00 in cryptocurrency. The demand went nowhere publicly, but it added one more layer to an investigation already buried under competing signals, false leads, and a family still holding on. June 2026. More than 4 months have passed since Nancy Guthrie walked through her front door and disappeared from the world. There is still no confirmed suspect, still no arrest, still no confirmed location, and still no answer to the question that has driven this entire investigation from the very first hour: where is she? The investigative threads that remain open are numerous and they are active. Forensic processing of physical evidence continues. The gloves recovered from the search area are still being analyzed. The DNA collected from Nancy's property, belonging to a second individual whose identity has not been publicly confirmed, remains part of the working case file. The Bitcoin trail attached to the ransom communications is being actively pursued. And in Mexico, the search efforts have not been closed. Every one of these threads is live. None of them has yet produced the breakthrough that ends this case. The questions that this investigation has not answered are the ones that matter most. Was this planned in advance? And if so, how far in advance did someone have to prepare to pull this off? How did the suspect know Nancy's routine well enough to arrive at her home in the early hours of February 1st? At a time that lined up precisely with when she had been dropped off hours before? How did they know her son-in-law's schedule? How did they know she would be alone? Was Nancy taken across the border into Mexico? And if so, through which crossing and by whom? Who authored the ransom notes? And were any of them genuine? Was a payment actually made? And if so, did it reach the right person or the wrong one? And the question that sits beneath all of the others: is Nancy Guthrie still alive? None of those questions have public answers today. What is clear is the scale of what law enforcement has deployed in pursuit of those answers. 150 FBI agents assigned to a single missing persons case. More than 13,000 public tips received and reviewed. Active international cooperation between American federal authorities and the Mexican government. A South Florida forensic laboratory processing evidence that local facilities could not handle. And a reward pool that climbed to over $1 million and still produced no confirmed arrest. This case is also unusual in ways that go beyond its public profile. The target was an 84-year-old woman with severely limited mobility. She was not someone who could be coerced or followed into a situation. She had to be taken directly from her home. And the person or persons who did that came prepared in a way that speaks to deliberate planning. A weapon, a mask, gloves, a backpack. The knowledge of how to locate and disable a doorbell camera. The awareness that the footage needed to be destroyed before it could be reviewed. This was not a crime of opportunity. Someone chose Nancy Guthrie specifically. Someone knew where she lived, knew when she would be home, and knew how to move through that property without leaving an obvious trail. The level of preparation involved in what happened on the night of January 31st into the early hours of February 1st is something investigators have not yet been able to trace back to a single name or face. And behind every piece of evidence and every open question is a woman who deserves to be remembered as more than a case number. Nancy Guthrie spent her evenings having dinner with her children. She watched church services online with her neighbor on Sunday mornings. She lived quietly in a neighborhood she had made her home. She left her medication on the counter, not because she forgot it, but because she never got the chance to take it. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman of faith, a person whose last confirmed act was saying goodnight to her family and going inside her home. Savannah Guthrie has said publicly that this does not leave her, not for a single moment, that she carries it to work and carries it home and carries it through every hour in between. But she keeps going because stopping is not something this family is willing to do. Neither should we. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, regardless of where in the world you are, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also reach the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly at 520-351-4900. Every tip is reviewed. Every call matters. If you watched this far, you already care about this case. Subscribe now so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what do you think happened to Nancy Guthrie? Like this video and share it. Someone watching this right now may have the one piece of information that brings her home